You know, my first inclination tonight on where to begin the program was the grim milestone we have passed with COVID. As Andrew mentioned, 200,000 dead Americans and counting, no plan by my government to deal with the crisis, and my president actually boasting that all those preventable deaths, they merit him a self-anointed A+ for his handling. I wanted to step back and ask how, in just 4 years, the United States went from the gold standard to the cautionary tale about the country no one wants to emulate. But this crisis, just as his gleeful lurch to appoint a Supreme Court justice as people are voting in this next election and Ms. Ginsburg's body has not even cooled, it could not be permitted or even encouraged without his share of enablers. Let me be clear. I am more concerned for the fate of my republic than at any other point in my 51 years, and I shudder at the permanent damage to our nation Donald Trump could do with another 4 years. But you already knew that. What I refuse to believe until now is that people that I once respected, whether or not I agree with their politics, they have no line. Whether it be out of cowardice for Trump and his tweets, whether their Machiavellian view that they can overlook his daily sins to manipulate him as a useful idiot, or that they too subscribe to the systematic destruction of American norms. Now, whatever their reason, I frankly don't care. They own this dark moment because Trump couldn't do it without them. And tonight, I want to focus maybe not on the most obvious suspect, Mitch McConnell, because I never thought he'd ever put country first. Instead, I want to share my thoughts on Lindsey Graham. The South Carolina Republican senator was known to many that years ago he was a former judge advocate general who, along with his best friend John McCain, they fought against fellow Republicans in the Bush administration when they lied about intelligence that got us into Iraq. They pushed back against torture and rendition because they said America stands for something and it's not that. When Trump the candidate emerged 5 years ago, Lindsey Graham still had a spine, and he told anyone who would listen exactly what Donald Trump was.
He's a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot. He doesn't represent my party.
I don't care if he drops out. Stay in the race. Just stop being a jackass. You don't have to run for president and be the world's biggest jackass. That's not your choices. I'm not going to try to get into the mind of Donald Trump because I don't think there's a whole lot of space there. I think he's a kook. I think he's crazy. I think he's unfit for office.
Unfit. He, of course, was right, but fellow Republican voters still chose Donald Trump as their standard bearer, as we know. Trump would, of course, then famously demean his dear friend John McCain and his decorated service, both in life and even in death. But by then, Lindsey, he was playing golf with the Donald. The old Lindsey, he would have spoken up about things like putting children in cages and separating families. He would have demanded his president stand up to Putin after he attacked our elections and paid bounties to the Taliban to kill American soldiers. The proud veteran, Mr. Graham, he would have condemned Trump for pardoning and celebrating war criminals and abandoning our allies, the Kurds. But the new Lindsey, he instead asked Trump to headline his next rally. The Lindsey Graham I used to know, he stood for something. I want you to listen to the torturous, pathetic flip-flop from 4 years ago to today when it comes to a Supreme Court vacancy.
I want you to use my words against me. If there's a Republican president in 2016 and a vacancy occurs in the last year of the first term, you can say, Lindsey Graham said, let's let the next president, whoever it might be, make that nomination, and you could use my words against me and you'd be absolutely right.
I will be leading the charge to make sure that President Trump's nominee has a hearing, goes to the floor of the United States Senate for a vote, because that is my job, and I believe I am doing what the people of South Carolina want me to do in this regard.
You know, that sign behind him, Low Country, was never more appropriate. Like so many who have sold their soul to this amoral excuse of a man, our president, Lindsey, I'm sure, will have collective amnesia about another old friend. Let's see if he abandons this one. I'm talking about Joe Biden. A few years ago, here is how the South Carolinian senator spoke of his old colleague.
If you can't admire Joe Biden as a person, then it's probably you got a problem. You need to do some self-evaluation, because what's not to like? He is as good a man as God ever created. He said some of the most incredibly heartfelt things that anybody could ever say to me. He's the nicest person I think I've ever met in politics.
Remember those words for whatever they're worth. Lindsey Graham is in many ways worse than our current president. He's worse because he knows better. He sees the daily destruction to the pillars of our democracy. His impeached and his shameless president wreaks on a daily basis. He knows the scarring to this ever-increasingly divided nation, and he sits there silently. He knows his old friend John McCain at least had the courage to stand up to this two-bit thug. But Lindsey, he shrinks when he needs to stand. I always thought this moment in American history deserved a reminder of when another fraud tried to make us our worst selves. Joe McCarthy. Remember him? Remember him when he brought his Red Scare? Well, Joe Welch, he famously asked him a question on the Senate floor I think deserves to be asking today.
You've done enough. Have you no sense of decency, sir, at long last? Have you left no sense of decency?
You know, whenever I heard that line, I always thought that Trump obviously should be on the modern day receiving end of it. But now, as I see this latest shameless chapter, I realize Mr. Trump, he deserves company.